Please, you must help me. I have no one else.
What is it? Tell me.
My life is in danger. I beg you, don't leave me.
She grabbed the arm of a complete stranger and pulled him close enough that their breath mixed in the cold morning air. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she was carrying. "Pretend you know me. Just for a moment. Please claim me as yours." The man she had grabbed turned slowly. He was dressed simply, his coat worn at the edges, his boots dusted with road mud. Nothing about him said wealth. Nothing about him said power. He looked like someone the world had long forgotten, but his eyes told a different story. They were steady, calm in a way that did not belong to a poor man standing in the middle of a crowded street market. They swept over her face once, reading something there that she had not said aloud, and then, without a single question, he placed his hand over hers on his arm and turned toward the men who had been following her. "There you are," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. His voice was smooth and certain, carrying a quiet authority that made 3 grown men stop walking. "I have been looking everywhere for you." The men exchanged a glance. One of them, the tallest, with a scar cutting through his left brow, took a step back. Just one step, but it said everything. They left. She exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. "Thank you," she managed, turning to look at him properly. Her name was Camelia Fenn, the disgraced daughter of a ruined merchant, and she had just begged a stranger to save her from the men her late father's creditors had sent to drag her away. She had nothing. No money, no family left, no name worth speaking. He studied her face for one long moment, and then said simply, "Walk with me." She did not know his name. She did not know why a man who looked like he owned nothing could silence dangerous men with 3 quiet words. She did not know that the coat he wore, plain as it was, had been chosen deliberately that morning, before he left the residence that most of England would have recognized on sight. She did not know she had just placed her hand on the arm of the Duke of Ashenvale. But she was about to find out. Now, if you were Camelia and a stranger stepped in to save you with that kind of calm and confidence, would you trust him or run? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story already has your heart racing, hit the like button and tell us where you are watching from. It truly helps more than you know. And if you want to find out who this mysterious man really is, and what happens when Camelia learns the truth, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss what comes next. Camelia Fenn had learned early that dignity was a luxury. It required a roof, shoes without holes, and at least one person willing to say your name without shame. She had none of those things anymore. What she had was a half-eaten bread roll tucked inside her coat, a small bundle of clothes tied with rope, and a heart that had stubbornly refused to stop beating even when everything around her collapsed. The morning she grabbed the stranger's arm was not planned. She had woken in the back room of a candle shop, whose owner, Mrs. Pott, had given her 3 days on a cot in exchange for sweeping floors and washing wax from work tables. Those 3 days had ended the night before. Mrs. Pott was not cruel, but she was practical, and practical women in London did not keep charity cases longer than agreed. Also, Camelia stepped into the grey morning with her bundle and her bread and her stubborn heart, and walked toward the market, because markets were warm with bodies and noise, and she could disappear inside one while she figured out what came next. She had not expected the men. There were 3 of them. She recognized the tall one immediately. His name was Griff, and he worked for Mr. Dunmore, the man who had purchased her father's debts after Reginald Fenn died of fever 6 months ago, leaving behind nothing but shame, unpaid loans, and one daughter nobody wanted. Griff had come to the house twice before. The first time he gave her 2 weeks to produce payment. The second time, 3 days. She had produced nothing either time because there was nothing to produce. She did not know what he intended this 3rd time, but the way he cut through the crowd like a blade, with 2 men flanking him, told her it was not to offer more time. She ran. Not in a straight line, because straight lines were foolish in a crowd. She cut left between a ribbon seller and a boy pushing a potato cart, then right past a baker's stall where the smell of warm bread hit her so hard her knees almost gave out. She could hear Griff directing the others, not loudly. He was too smart for that. But she could track the shift of his voice as it followed her. That was when she saw the man standing near the edge of the market, just outside the noise of the stalls, looking at nothing in particular with both hands in his coat pockets. She did not think. Thinking was a privilege she could not afford. She grabbed his arm, pulled herself close, and begged. And he answered. His name she still did not know. He had walked her away from the market after the men left, one hand lightly at her elbow, as if she were made of something worth being careful with. Nobody had treated her that way in a very long time. He said almost nothing for the first 3 minutes, and she was grateful because she was still relearning how to breathe. They stopped near a stone wall where a chestnut seller was doing slow business, and he turned to look at her properly. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she said. "Are they likely to come back today?" She thought about Griff, about the look on his face the last time he stood in her father's empty doorway. "Yes," she said. He nodded slowly, the way people nodded when processing something rather than simply agreeing. "Then you should not return to wherever you came from." "I was not going back," she said. "I have nowhere to go back to." Something moved across his face. Not pity. She had seen enough pity in 6 months to recognize it instantly. This was quieter. Something almost like recognition, which made no sense because they had never met. "What is your name?" he asked. "Camelia Fenn." He repeated it once, quietly, as if placing it somewhere safe. "I am called Reese," he said. "Just that. No family name attached." She did not ask for more. She had learned not to ask men questions they had not offered answers to. He reached into his coat and produced a small white card printed with nothing but a street address. No name, just a location. "Go here," he said. "Tell them Reese sent you. They will give you a room and food, or no one will ask anything of you." She stared at the card, then at him. "Why?" "Because you needed help," he said, "and I happened to be standing there." It was so simple it almost made her laugh, or cry. She was not entirely sure which. She took the card and he left, and she stood there in the noise of the market, holding something small and white that felt impossibly like a door opening. The address led her to a tall townhouse on a quiet street that felt different from the rest of the city. Settled. The kind of building that had stopped trying to impress anyone long ago. She knocked twice, and the door was opened by a woman of perhaps 50, with silver hair pulled back neatly, and the kind of face that had seen everything and judged very little. "Reese sent me," Camellia said. The woman, whose name was Mrs. Gale, now opened the door wider and stepped aside without a word. Inside, the house was warm and careful. Everything in it looked chosen rather than collected. Fresh flowers on a side table, a fire going in the front room, books stacked on a bench near the window. Mrs. Gale brought tea and bread and butter and a soft boiled egg without being asked, set them by the fire, and sat across with folded hands. "You will stay in the second room upstairs," she said. "Water is hot at 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening. Breakfast is at 8. You are welcome to the library." "Who lives here?" Camellia asked. "A gentleman who values his privacy," Mrs. Gale said, firmly. Finally, Camellia ate her egg. It was perfectly cooked. She did not sleep well that first night. The room was comfortable and the bed was clean, but her mind refused to rest, or she kept turning the day over. The men, the market, the stranger, the card, the house. None of it had the logic of safe things. Safe things were predictable. This was not. By morning, she had made a decision. She would not be a charity case. She would find a way to be useful, and she would offer it without waiting to be asked. She came downstairs and found Mrs. Gale already in the kitchen with a young woman named Tilly, who had flour on her apron and a laugh too large for the quiet house. Through the kitchen window she could see a broad-shouldered older man moving through the garden with the precise economy of a former soldier. Mrs. Gale introduced him later as Captain Holt, who managed the property and ran errands for the household. And then there was Felix. He appeared at the back door at 8:15, perhaps 14 years old, with ink-stained fingers, a worn satchel, and eyes far too watchful for his age. He said nothing during breakfast except to ask Tilly for more jam, but he observed Camellia with a careful steadiness that unsettled her in a way she could not immediately name. 3 days passed. She reorganized the kitchen accounts, which were a tangle of crossed-out figures and misremembered sums, and turned them into something clean and usable. She sorted the library into an order that made finding things possible. On the third evening, Mrs. Gale set a cup of tea in front of her and said, "You were educated." "My father believed in it," Camellia said, "before everything fell." Mrs. Gale nodded. "He sent word," she said. "Reese. He asked how you were settling." Camelia's hand paused on her cup. "Why would he do that?" Mrs. Gale looked at her with an expression that was not quite a smile. "Some men," she said carefully, "carry more than they show." It was not an answer, but it kept her awake again that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about eyes too steady for a poor man, and a voice that had made dangerous men step back without a single threat spoken. She thought about a man named Reese who sent word asking how she was. She did not sleep for a long time. He returned on the 7th day. Camellia heard the front door and knew immediately it was him. Not by sound exactly, but by the quality of it. Deliberate, unhurried, the movement of someone accustomed to owning whatever space they entered, even while pretending otherwise. She stayed in the library with her hands on the shelf. Footsteps crossed the hallway and stopped at the doorway. He looked at the reorganized shelves first, then at her. "You changed the books," he said. "They were unsortable before," she said. "I hope that was not overstepping." It was not. He stepped in, picked up a volume, glanced at it, set it back. "How are you?" "Better," she said. Then, because she had made herself a promise, "I owe you a great deal, and I would like to repay it. I can manage correspondence, keep records, oversee accounts. I have been doing it already. I am offering it formally." He looked at her steadily. "You are offering to earn your keep." "I am offering to be worth something," she said. 6 months of helplessness lived underneath those words, and she did not try to hide it. A pause. Then, "Mrs. Gale has wanted someone to handle correspondence for some time. She dislikes writing letters. The work is yours if you want it." She had prepared for resistance, for careful male hesitation, dressed as concern. A man who simply said yes was something she did not know how to receive, so she said, "Thank you," and meant it plainly. He moved to leave. She said, "Why were you at that market?" He stopped. His back was to her. "I was watching something," he said. "Watching what?" He turned just enough. "The men following you. I had been watching them for some time before you arrived." "You knew about Griff," she said. "I knew about his employer," he said. "Griff is an instrument. Nothing more." That particular calm, that settled, decided quality in his voice. And then she understood it fully. He had not been a stranger passing by. He had been there on purpose. "You were not there by chance," she said. "No." "Then why did you not tell me?" He turned fully. "Because you needed to feel like you had acted," he said. "Not like someone had acted for you." She had nothing to put against that. He was right in a way that reached past her arguments entirely, because no one had ever understood that particular distinction before. Not anyone who had known her for years. He left. She stood in the library a long time after, holding a book she had forgotten about, or turning the truth over carefully. He had known about Dunmore. He had positioned himself in that market. He had let her believe it was a chance, because he understood something about her pride that a stranger had no business understanding. She asked Felix about him the next morning. Felix was at the kitchen table with toast and something he covered with his arm when she sat down. "Who is Reese?" she said. "The man who owns the house," Felix said. "Beyond that." Felix put a large piece of toast in his mouth. "A gentleman," he said through it. "He dresses like a laborer." "Some gentlemen do," Felix said carefully. "Felix." He looked at her. The careful watchfulness shifted into something more uncomfortable. The look of someone who genuinely liked a person and genuinely could not tell them the truth. "He helps people," Felix said finally, more quietly, without wanting anything said about it. "That is honestly all I know." She let it go. She was on the last letter of the afternoon's correspondence when the shouting came from outside. Sharp, male, agitated. Then a heavy impact against the front door. Captain Holt was already moving. Mrs. Gale appeared at the top of the stairs. Tilly came from the kitchen holding a rolling pin. The door opened, and 2 men half carried a third inside. The third was young, dark-haired, conscious only barely, bleeding from a cut above his eye and from his lip. One of the men carrying him was tall and angular, with an alarm written plainly across his long face. His name was Peregrine. The other was Felix, satchel still on his shoulder, looking genuinely frightened for the first time since she had met him. "Poor Dunmore's men," Peregrine said to Captain Holt. "Waiting outside the Aldgate office, 3 of them. They got to Jasper in broad daylight." Jasper was the young man now sitting on the hall bench, both eyes open, focused approximately on the ceiling. Camelia moved without deciding to. She had spent 3 months nursing her dying father, and she knew what a wound needing cleaning looked like. Warm water and cloth, she told Tilly. Something cold for the swelling. Tilly went immediately. She worked quickly and gently, pressing a folded cloth against the cut until the bleeding slowed. Jasper watched her with dazed surprise. "Thank you," he said. Young voice, younger than his face. "Does anything feel broken?" He tested his jaw carefully. "No, just my dignity." "Dignity recovers," she said. The front door opened. Doris entered, and the entire hallway reoriented toward him without a word from anyone. He looked at everything once, crossed to Jasper, and crouched in front of him. "How bad?" he said. "Survivable," Jasper said. Rhys looked at Peregrine. "They knew exactly where the office was," Peregrine said. "Someone told them." And Rhys, he is not being cautious anymore. Daylight, a public street. Dunmore is not afraid of anything right now. "He will be," Rhys said. Quiet and even, and absolute. Camelia was watching his hands, perfectly still. She was watching the way everyone in the room faced him without being asked, and she was thinking about one name, Dunmore, the man who held her father's debts, whose instrument Griff had been tracking her through the market for months. "Rhys," she said. He looked at her. "What does Dunmore want with you?" Silence filled the hallway completely. "That is a conversation for later," he said. "Is it?" she said. "His men attacked someone in your household in open daylight. I have been living in this house for a week. His man has been hunting me for months. I would like to understand what I am standing in the middle of." Peregrine said nothing. Felix looked at the wall. Captain Holt studied the floor with great interest. Rhys stood slowly. Something in his expression moved. "Tonight," he said. "After dinner. I will answer you." She believed him. That itself surprised her. She had stopped trusting men's promises 4 months after her father died. But she believed this one. That night she sat across from him in the lamp-lit library, and he said, "My full name is Rhys Cavendish. I am the Duke of Ashenvale." She said nothing for a long moment. "You are a duke," she said. "Yes." "And the coat. The plain address card, all of it deliberate." "Yes." "Why?" "Because people speak honestly to men who appear to have nothing," he said. "And honest information is the only kind worth having." She absorbed this. Then, following the thread she had been pulling since the hallway, "Dunmore is blackmailing your family." He went very still. "Your brother?" she said. Not a question. "He has something over your brother." Rhys looked at her for a long moment. "For 2 years he has used it to extract money from the estate. If it becomes public, my brother's future ends before it begins." "And you have been building a case against him." "Yes." "And my father's records," she said slowly, the shape of it forming completely now, "that contain proof of the payments." "I believe so," he said. "Your father supplied Dunmore's operations before the business failed. His accounts would show the transactions clearly." She looked at her hands. She thought about her father, who had believed in honest exchange above everything, who had recorded every figure with careful love, who had died not knowing his meticulous records might be the very thing to bring a powerful man down. "I have them," she said. Rhys became absolutely still. "I carried them when I left the house," she said. "They are in my bundle upstairs. I kept them because they were the last things he touched. I did not know what they meant, but I kept them." He looked at her, and for the first time, his face held something unguarded, something open and real. It looked, she thought, almost like relief. Camellia, he said, her given name. First time. Something moved through her that she did not try to name yet. But she thought, with a quiet and stubborn flicker of warmth she had not felt in 6 months, that she might want to. The records were a bundle of leather-bound pages, tied with a thin cord that had frayed at the edges from being handled too many times. Camellia brought them downstairs the following morning and set them on the library table in front of Rhys without ceremony. He looked at them for a moment before touching them. "May I?" he said. She nodded. He untied the cord carefully and opened the first page. His eyes moved across the columns of figures with the focused attention of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Peregrine stood at his shoulder, doing the same. Jasper, whose eye was swollen half shut, but who had refused to stay in bed, sat across the table, watching both of them, with his one working eye and saying nothing. Camellia sat at the far end of the table and watched all three of them, and tried to read the room. It did not take long. Peregrine made a sharp sound that was not quite a word. Rhys turned a page slowly, then another, and then he set the records flat on the table and looked at her. "Your father recorded everything," he said. "He believed in precision," she said. "He recorded the payments by date, by amount, and by the name of the intermediary Dunmore used to disguise them," Rhys said. "Every transaction for 14 months. This is not merely evidence. This is a complete record of a criminal operation." The room was very quiet. "So it is enough," she said. "It is more than enough," Peregrine said. He was looking at the pages with an expression she could only describe as hungry. "With this we can go to the magistrate. We can go to Parliament if necessary. Dunmore will not be able to buy his way out of this." "He will try," Jasper said, and from behind his swollen eye. "Let him try," Peregrine said. Rhys had not taken his eyes off Camellia. "You carried these for 6 months," he said, "through everything." "They were my father's," she said simply. Something moved across his face that she was beginning to recognize. That quiet, unguarded thing that appeared and disappeared quickly, like light through a closing door. He looked back down at the records, and she looked away before either of them had to decide what to do with the moment. The plan, as Rhys explained it that afternoon, with all of them gathered in the library, was straightforward in its design and complicated in its execution. The records would be copied in full, the copies stored separately in 2 locations for safety. The originals would be presented to Lord Harwick, or a senior magistrate who had been attempting to build a case against Dunmore for 3 years, and who could be trusted because Dunmore had tried to bribe him twice and failed both times, which made him both honest and motivated. "Harwick will move quickly once he sees these," Rhys said, "but Dunmore will hear something is happening before the arrest can be made. He always does. He has people watching the magistrate's office." "Which means he will come for the records first," Captain Holt said. "Yes," Rhys said. "And for me," Camellia said. Every head in the room turned toward her. "I am the one who produced them," she said. "If Dunmore finds out the records came from me, he will want to eliminate me as a witness before anything reaches the magistrate." She said it plainly because it was a plain fact, and dressing it in softer language would not make it less true. Rhys looked at her for a long moment. "You will not be alone," he said. "I know," she said. And she did know it, which was strange, because a week ago she had been completely alone in the world and had considered that her permanent condition. What she did not say, what she kept carefully inside where no one could see it, was that being not alone was beginning to feel dangerous in a different way entirely. A way that had nothing to do with Griff or Dunmore or records in a leather bundle. A way that had everything to do with a man who said her name like it was something he was being careful with. She kept that to herself. The copying took 2 days. Felix wrote in a small, extraordinarily neat hand that surprised everyone except Mrs. Gale, who apparently knew everything about everyone in the house and was surprised by nothing. Peregrine copied alongside him, less neatly but quickly. Camellia checked both copies against the originals with methodical attention, catching 3 transcription errors that would have mattered in a legal proceeding and correcting them without comment. Rhys watched her do this from the other side of the table and said nothing, but she was aware of being watched and chose to find it steady rather than unsettling, which was a decision she made deliberately and had to remake approximately every 20 minutes. On the second evening, while Felix and Peregrine were finishing the last pages, Jasper appeared beside her at the window where she had gone to rest her eyes from close work. "He does not usually tell people," Jasper said, without preamble. She looked at him. His eye was less swollen today. "Tell people what?" "Who he is," Jasper said. "The title. He has not told anyone outside the household in 2 years. Not since Dunmore started using the family name as leverage." She thought about this carefully. "Why are you telling me?" Jasper looked out the window. He was young in some ways, and not young at all in others, and she thought he had probably seen things in Rhys's service that had aged the parts of him that age. "Because he told you on the 8th day," Jasper said. "He told my father after 3 months. He told Peregrine after 6 weeks. Our Felix has known from the beginning, but Felix is a specific case." "What is Felix?" she asked. "Rhys's ward," Jasper said. "Unofficially. His parents died when Dunmore's first scheme collapsed 4 years ago. They were involved, not willingly, and they paid for it." He paused. "Rhys has been looking after him since." She looked across the room to where Felix sat bent over the pages, his ink-stained fingers moving carefully. 14 years old with the eyes of someone twice that. She understood those eyes better now. She understood Rhys better too. And that was the thing she had not been prepared for. Not the title. Not the disguise. Not even the plan to bring Dunmore down. What she had not been prepared for was the accumulation of small true things that added up to a picture of a man who carried other people's weight quietly and asked for nothing in return, and thought that was simply what a person did. That night, she lay awake again and had a very stern internal conversation with herself about the precise distance between gratitude and something more complicated, and why that distance mattered, and why she needed to maintain it. The conversation was not entirely convincing. The following morning the copies were complete, and Rhys sent word to Lord Harwick through a channel that bypassed Dunmore's watchers entirely. Harwick's response came back within 3 hours. He would receive them. Privately. That evening, before the house shifted into a particular kind of tense readiness that Camellia felt in her chest, like a held breath. Captain Holt checked his pistol twice. Peregrine came and went 3 times with his coat collar up. Felix sat very still at the kitchen table and ate nothing at breakfast, which Tilly noted with audible concern and which Camelia thought said a great deal about what the boy understood was at stake. She found Rhys in the hallway at 2:30, standing by the window with his hands in his pockets, looking at the street below with focused stillness. "Are you afraid?" she asked. He turned. Something in his expression shifted at the question, as if he had not expected it, which she found interesting because he seemed to have expected most things. "For my brother," he said. "Yes." "What is his name?" "Theo," he said, and the way he said it, simply, without the careful management he applied to most things, told her everything about what his brother meant to him. "How old is he?" 22, Rhys said. "He made a mistake at 19 that Dunmore found out about. It was not a terrible mistake. It was the mistake of a young man who did not yet know the world was full of people who collect other people's errors and wait." He paused. "Theo does not know I have been doing this. He thinks the payments are coming from estate funds I am managing poorly." "He thinks you are a bad duke," she said. The corner of Rhys's mouth moved, just slightly. "He thinks I am a financially irresponsible duke, yes." "And you let him think that?" "It was better than the alternative," he said. She looked at him, but at the line of his jaw and the steadiness of his eyes, and the worn coat he wore because honesty required disguise in a world full of people watching for advantage. And she thought about a man who let his younger brother believe the worst of him rather than reveal a painful truth, and who had been quietly dismantling a blackmailer's operation for 2 years without telling anyone who did not absolutely need to know. "He's going to feel terrible when he finds out," she said. "Yes," Rhys said. "And then he will be free." He looked at her. "That is worth feeling terrible for." She held his gaze for 1 moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then Peregrine came through the front door with news that Harwick had moved the meeting to an hour earlier, and the held breath of the house released into motion. The meeting with Lord Harwick took place in a private study in a narrow house off a street that had no reason to attract attention, which was exactly the point. Rhys went with Peregrine and Captain Holt. Camelia stayed behind because Rhys asked her to, and she agreed because she was not foolish enough to mistake wanting to go for needing to go. She sat in the library with Jasper and Felix, and the particular agony of waiting. Jasper read. Felix didn't read. He sat with his satchel on his lap and turned a small wooden button over and over between his fingers, which she recognized as the habit of someone managing fear through their hands, and she said nothing about it, because some things were better left unspoken. Till he brought tea, nobody drank. An hour passed, then another half. "Is it always like this?" Camelia asked Jasper. "Well, the waiting?" Jasper looked up from his book. "Yes." "Peregrine says the waiting is the actual work. The action part is just the result of it. Peregrine is philosophical for a man who runs messages in dangerous places," she said. "Peregrine studied at Oxford for 2 years before his money ran out," Jasper said. "It left a mark." She almost smiled. Then the front door opened, and all 3 of them were on their feet before the sound finished. It was Captain Holt, alone. "They are coming separately," he said immediately, reading their faces. Rhys and Peregrine took different routes back. Precaution. "Harwick?" she said. Captain Holt looked at her with the measured expression of a man who had delivered both good and bad news in his life and knew how to carry both. "Harwick accepted the records," he said, "but he is moving tonight." The breath she had been holding for 2 hours came out of her all at once. Felix made a small sound and looked at the ceiling. Jasper sat back down and appeared to resume reading, though she noticed he was holding the book upside down. Rhys came through the door 11 minutes later. She knew it was 11 minutes, because she had been counting without meaning to. He came in from the cold with his coat dark at the shoulders from light rain, and looked across the hallway and found her face immediately, as if he had known exactly where she would be standing. "It is done," he said. "Will Harwick act?" she said. "Tonight," he said. He already had 3 pieces of the case assembled. Your father's records were the last piece. He said, and I will tell you exactly what he said, because you deserve to hear it, that your father was the most precise record keeper he had encountered in 40 years of legal work. She pressed her lips together very hard. He kept everything, she said, when she trusted her voice. He kept everything, Rhys agreed, and his voice was gentle in a way that undid something she had been keeping carefully knotted for 6 months. She turned toward the window and gave herself exactly 30 seconds. Then she turned back and her face was composed and she said, "What happens now?" "Now we wait for Harwick to move," Rhys said. "Dunmore will be taken before morning if everything holds. But between now and then, we should assume he may learn something is happening. His network is extensive." "So we are not safe yet," she said. "Not entirely," he said. "Or no." What none of them had accounted for was how fast Dunmore's network actually was. The warning came from Felix, who had slipped out the back while the rest of them were talking, and returned 20 minutes later through the kitchen door at a run, with his satchel banging against his side, and his face stripped of all its careful composure. "They know," Felix said. "Dunmore knows something happened at Harwick's office. Griff has men moving. I counted 4 on the street at the south end, and 2 more coming from the east." The room went very quiet in the particular way of people shifting from waiting into something else entirely. Captain Holt was already moving. "The back entrance is clear," he said, "for now." "We need to move the originals," Peregrine said. "The copies are safe, but if they get the originals, they will argue the copies are fabricated." "The originals are upstairs," Camelia said. She was already moving toward the stairs. Rhys caught her arm. Not roughly. Just enough. She stopped and looked at him. "I will get them," he said. "They are in my room," she said. "I know exactly where." A half-second of something between them. Then he let go of her arm, and they went up the stairs together, which was faster than arguing about it. The bundle was where she had left it, tucked inside her larger bag beneath her spare clothes. She pulled it out and handed it to him, and he tucked it inside his coat against his chest, and buttoned the coat over it, and she watched him do this, and thought, with a clarity that surprised her, that she trusted him with it completely, with her father's last, careful work, with the thing that might finally mean something. She had not trusted anyone completely in 6 months. They came back downstairs to controlled urgency. Captain Holt had bolted the front and was at the side window. Tilly had been sent to the uppermost floor with instructions to stay there. Jasper had found, from somewhere, a walking stick that he was holding in a way that suggested it had purposes beyond walking. "There is another option," Rhys said to the room. "All of us leaving at once draws attention. One person moving quietly with the records, taking the east lane to Harwick's house directly, is faster and less visible than a group. You," Peregrine said. No, Rhys said. Me they are watching for. They know my face, even in a poor man's coat by now. He paused. Or someone they have never seen near this house. Someone who moves like a person with an ordinary errand. The room understood before he finished. Camelia understood first. Me, she said. No, Rhys said immediately, firmly, with a control that cracked very slightly at the edges. I am the only one here Dunmore's men have not connected to you, she said. They know I exist, but they do not know I am in this house. To them I am still a debtor's daughter, hiding somewhere in the city. She looked at him. I am the logical choice, and you know it. Peregrine said nothing. Captain Holt said nothing. The silence of men who agreed with her and were watching Rhys decide what to do with it. Rhys looked at her for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing that thing where they were very still and very intent simultaneously. "Do you walk directly to Harwick's house?" he said. "The address is on this." He produced a card. Of course he produced a card. You do not stop. You do not engage anyone. If anyone approaches you, you drop the records and run. I am not dropping my father's records, she said. Camelia. I will run faster than they expect, she said. I am very motivated. Something moved through his expression that in another context, in a safer moment, she might have called anguished. Captain Holt will follow at a distance, he said. Far enough to be invisible, close enough to matter. All right, she said. He looked at her for one more moment, long enough that she felt it somewhere beneath her ribs. Be careful, he said, quietly, just to her. I will, she said. Just to him. She took the records from inside his coat, tucked them under her arm beneath her own coat, and walked out the back door into the cold, dark city alone. The East Lane was narrow and poorly lit, which was either fortunate or unfortunate, depending on what happened next. Her footsteps were quiet on the wet stones. The air smelled of rain and coal smoke, and the particular sharpness of a city at night that had not yet gone to sleep. She counted her breaths. She did not run. Running attracted attention, and attention was the one thing she could not afford. She was 2 streets from Harwick's address when she heard footsteps behind her. Not close, but deliberate, matching her pace with the particular precision of someone who was following, rather than simply walking the same direction. She did not turn around. She adjusted her grip on the records beneath her coat and walked faster, but not quite running, and thought about her father, who had written everything down with careful love, and about Rhys, who had said be careful in a voice that meant something more than the words, and about 6 months of being alone in the world and what it felt like to no longer be. She turned the last corner. Harwick's house was lit on the ground floor. She could see it. She was almost there. The footsteps behind her quickened. She ran. She hit the door with her fist 3 times, and it opened before the 3rd knock was finished, and she was inside with the records pressed against her chest and the door shut behind her, and a tall, grey-haired man in a dark coat was looking at her with sharp, assessing eyes. You are the Fen girl, he said. Yes, she said, breathing hard. You have the records. Yes, she said. He looked at her for a moment, with something that was not quite admiration, but was adjacent to it. Your father would be proud of you, he said. She had been holding herself together through cold streets and following footsteps, and 6 months of everything, and those words, said plainly by a grey-haired stranger, very nearly finished her. She pressed her lips together, held out the records and said, "Then let us make sure it counts." Lord Harwick took the records with both hands, the way people received things they understood the weight of, and carried them immediately to his desk. 2 other men were already in the room, men Camelia had not seen when she entered, sitting in chairs along the wall, with the quiet alertness of people who had been waiting for exactly this. Harwick introduced them without ceremony as Mr. Settle and Mr. Crane, both officers of the court, both present to witness the transfer officially. She understood then that Harwick had been ready. He had arranged everything before they even sent word that evening. He had been ready for a long time, and her father's records were simply the final lock turning. "Sit," Harwick said to her, not unkindly. She sat. He opened the bundle and read in silence for 4 minutes. Mr. Settle leaned over his shoulder. Mr. Crane stayed where he was and watched Camelia with careful professional eyes that were taking note of everything without appearing to. "This is Reginald Fenn's hand?" Harwick said without looking up. "Yes," she replied. "I watched him write in it my entire childhood. Every entry, every margin note, every correction. That is his. You would testify to that." "Without hesitation," she said. Harwick looked up at her then. "You walked through the city alone at night, with Dunmore's men in the streets to bring this here," he said. "Someone was following me on the last 2 streets," she said. "I ran the final stretch." Harwick looked at Mr. Crane. Something passed between them. "There is a man outside now," Mr. Crane said to her, not unkindly. "He arrived 40 seconds after you. He has been standing at the end of the street since." Her stomach tightened. "Griff?" she said. "Possibly," Mr. Crane said. "He will find nothing useful standing there. This house has been a legal property of the court for 11 years. Dunmore cannot touch what happens inside it." He paused. "But you cannot leave the way you came." A knock came at the study door. Harwick opened it, and Captain Holt stepped inside, slightly breathless, with rain on his coat, and relief written plainly across his broad, weathered face when he saw her sitting unharmed in the chair. "Reese," she said immediately. "At the house," Captain Holt said. "Waiting. The men on the South Street moved off 20 minutes ago, or either they got word something had already happened, or they lost patience. Or Dunmore called them back because he already knows it is too late," Harwick said. "He was still looking at the records, which is increasingly my suspicion." He closed the bundle and looked at Settle and Crane. "Tonight," he said simply. Both men stood. Camelia looked at Harwick. "What happens to my father's debts?" she said. It was not the largest question in the room, but it was hers. Harwick looked at her with the focused attention of a man who respected precise questions. "Debts accumulated through Dunmore's fraudulent operations will be reviewed as part of the legal proceedings," he said. "I cannot promise outcomes, but I can tell you that a great deal of what Dunmore has collected over the past 4 years is going to be examined very carefully." It was not a promise, but it was something solid, and she held it. Captain Holt brought her back through a different route, longer and quieter, through streets that were emptying as the night deepened. She walked beside him in silence for most of it, and he let her have the silence, which she appreciated. "How long have you served him?" she asked, halfway back. 14 years, Captain Holt said. "Since before his father died. Since before the title." Is he always like this? She said. Captain Holt considered the question with the seriousness it apparently deserved. He is always exactly what is needed, he said finally, whatever form that takes. She thought about that the rest of the way home. Rhys was in the hallway when they came through the back door. He was standing with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and the expression of a man who had been managing worry through absolute stillness and was not entirely succeeding. When he saw her, his expression shifted through several things very quickly before settling into something controlled. "You ran," he said. "I said I would," she said. "You are all right." "Completely," she said. He looked at her for a long moment with that careful, intent stillness. Then he uncrossed his arms and said, "Harwick has the records." "Yes, and he moved tonight. He had people ready." She paused. "My father's records were the last piece. He said so." Something in Rhys's face changed. A loosening of something that had been held tight for a very long time. Peregrine appeared from the library. "No, it is done then," he said, reading the room. "It is done," Rhys said. Felix, from the kitchen doorway, made a sound that was half laugh and half something much younger and much more relieved. Tilly came downstairs, having ignored her instructions to stay on the upper floor entirely, and declared that she was making supper regardless of what anyone said, and nobody said anything. They ate at the kitchen table, all of them together, which Camelia suspected was not the usual arrangement in a duke's household, even a disguised one, but nobody seemed to find it unusual, and she found she did not either. Jasper told a story about the first time he had run a message for Rhys and gone to entirely the wrong address with entirely the wrong information and caused a minor diplomatic incident that Rhys had spent a week quietly resolving. Rhys denied none of it. Peregrine added details that made it worse. Felix laughed with his whole face, which transformed him from watchful to simply young, and Camelia thought she had not sat at a table that felt like this in a very long time. She caught Rhys watching her from across the table at one point. He did not look away when she caught him. She looked away first, which she immediately considered a strategic error. Later, when the kitchen had been cleared, and Jasper and Peregrine had gone, and Felix was asleep on the bench with his satchel under his head, because he had fallen asleep there before Mrs. Gale could redirect him, Camelia stood at the library window and looked at the quiet street below. She heard Rhys come in. She did not turn. "You should sleep," he said. "I am not tired," she said. This was not entirely true. He came to stand beside her at the window, not close enough to be inappropriate, close enough that she was aware of it completely. They looked at the street together in silence for a moment. "What will you do now?" he said. "When this is fully resolved, when Dunmore is gone and the proceedings are finished." She had been thinking about this. "I do not know yet," she said honestly. "I am better at managing other people's futures than my own." "You managed yours well enough this past week," he said. "I had considerable help," she said. "You ran through dark streets alone with dangerous men behind you," he said. "That was not my help. That was you." She looked at the window glass, at the faint reflection of both of them standing there. "My father used to say that courage was just fear that had somewhere specific to go," she said. "Tonight I had somewhere specific to go." Rhys was quiet for a moment. "I would like you to stay," he said. She turned to look at him then. He was looking at the window, at the same reflection she had been looking at. "In the house," he said. And then, after a pause that was careful and deliberate, and beyond the house, if that is something you would consider. The fire in the library crackled. The street below was empty and still. You are a duke, she said. I am aware, he said. I am a ruined merchant's daughter, with no name worth speaking, and no money, and no connections. You are the woman who kept her father's records through 6 months of loss, because they were the last thing he touched, he said. You are the woman who offered to work for her keep before she had been in this house for 3 days. Or you are the woman who walked through a dark city alone and ran the last stretch and delivered exactly what was needed without flinching. He looked at her now, directly, with no careful management of expression. That is not nothing, Camellia. That is not close to nothing. She looked at him, at the man behind the worn coat and the steady eyes and all the weight he carried quietly for other people. You should know, she said, that I am not easy to live alongside. I reorganize things. I ask questions people would prefer not to answer. I do not stop pulling at a thread once I have started. I know, he said, and the corner of his mouth moved. I found it extraordinary from approximately the 3rd day. She felt something warm and stubborn move through her chest. Then yes, she said. I would consider it. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face was open in a way she suspected very few people ever saw. Good, he said quietly. Outside the window, the city was dark and settling. Somewhere across it, Lord Harwick and his men were moving. Something that had pressed down on this household for 2 years was lifting, slowly, like weather changing. She stood beside him at the window and felt, for the first time in 6 months, that the ground beneath her was solid. Dunmore was arrested before dawn. Camellia learned this from Felix, who learned it from a source he declined to name, but who was clearly the kind of source 14-year-old boys with ink-stained fingers and watchful eyes cultivated through methods nobody examined too closely. Felix appeared at her door at 6:30 in the morning, knocked 3 times, and said through the wood, "They have him." And then she heard his footsteps running back down the hall to tell everyone else. She lay still for a moment in the clean bed in the warm room and let it settle into her properly. They have him. She dressed quickly and came downstairs to find the kitchen already full. Mrs. Gale was making tea with the focused energy of someone who needed to do something with her hands. Tilly was making everything else, apparently, given the volume of food appearing on the table. Jasper was sitting with both eyes fully open for the first time since the attack, the swelling finally reduced enough, and he looked younger for it. Peregrine was pacing the length of the kitchen and back, which Mrs. Gale bore with remarkable patience. Rhys was not there. "Where is he?" she asked Captain Holt, who was standing by the window with his tea. "Went out at 5, Captain Holt said. He had somewhere to be." She thought about that. Then she thought about what Rhys had told her, his brother Theo, who believed for 2 years that his elder brother was managing the estate poorly, who did not know what had been done in his name and for his protection. Rhys had gone to tell him. She sat down and drank her tea and tried to imagine that conversation, and found she could not quite hold it in her mind. 2 brothers in a room, one of them carrying 2 years of silent work, and the other carrying 2 years of quiet shame, and the moment between them when everything shifted. She hoped it went well. She thought it probably would not be simple even if it went well, The truth rarely was. The legal proceedings moved faster than she had expected. Harwick had constructed his case with the precision of a man who had been waiting years for exactly this moment and had no intention of allowing Dunmore's lawyers to find a foothold anywhere. By the second day, the newspapers had it, though the accounts were careful about names, or referring to a prominent financier whose fraudulent operations had been exposed through documentary evidence provided by a private source. Private source was her, or rather, her father. She thought about that distinction. On the third day, a man from Harwick's office came to the house with documents relating to her father's debts. The debts, as part of the proceedings against Dunmore, had been reviewed and found to be fraudulently inflated, the interest compounded through illegal means. The original sum, Harwick's man explained with the pleasant efficiency of someone delivering good news, had been cleared against assets seized from Dunmore's operation. She read the documents twice. Then she set them down on the library table and sat very still for a moment. Her father's name was clean, not merely cleared of debt. For the record would show that Reginald Fenn had been a victim of financial fraud, not a failed merchant. His name, his careful, honest name, was restored. She pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed. Mrs. Gale appeared in the doorway, took one look at her, and went away again. She came back 2 minutes later with tea and a small plate of shortbread, and set them down without a word. And that wordless, practical kindness was so exactly right that Camelia had to look at the ceiling for a moment. "Thank you," she said. "He would have been proud," Mrs. Gale said simply. And then she left, because she understood that some moments needed space more than company. Rees returned that afternoon. He came in quietly, as he always did, but something in the set of his shoulders was different. Lighter, or the way a man moved when he had put something down that he had been carrying a long distance. She was in the library. He found her there, which she suspected was not accidental. "Theo?" she said. He sat down in the chair across from her. He looked tired in the specific way that came not from lack of sleep, but from a large emotional expenditure. He was angry first, he said, for about 20 minutes. Then he cried, which he will deny if anyone asks. Then he asked me approximately 40 questions. Then he said thank you, and meant it, and it was the most difficult thank you I have ever received. "Because you didn't want thanks," she said. "Because I wanted him not to have needed it in the first place," he said. She looked at him. "Is he all right?" "He will be," Rees said. "He is 22 and resilient and furious at Dunmore in a way that is frankly useful because it is replacing the shame." He paused. "He wants to meet you." She blinked. "Me?" "I told him about you," Rees said, simply, as if this were obvious. "What did you tell him?" Rees looked at her across the lamp-lit library with the direct, unmanaged gaze that she had come to understand was the most honest version of him. "The truth," he said. "All of it. From the market to last night." She held his gaze. "And what did he say?" "He said," Rees said, with that almost movement at the corner of his mouth, "that it sounded to him like you were the one who solved everything, and I was merely decorative." She laughed. It came out genuine and sudden and surprised her. She could not remember the last time she had laughed like that, and the feeling of it was strange and good simultaneously. Rees watched her laugh with an expression that was entirely unguarded and entirely warm. "He is not wrong," she said when she recovered. "He is frequently not wrong," Rhys said. "It is an irritating quality in a younger brother." The warmth between them was quiet and present, and neither of them addressed it directly, and both of them were completely aware of it, which she thought was perhaps the most honest way to hold something new. Not rushing it, not naming it before it was ready to be named. Simply letting it be there, real and unhurried, in a room full of books she had organized, and a house she had come to know, and a life that was, improbably, beginning to feel like it belonged to her again. And there were practical things still ahead. The full legal proceedings would take months. Theo would need time. The household would need to adjust to a new shape. She would need to determine what her place in that shape actually looked like, what it was called, what it meant. She was not afraid of that. She had faced worse uncertainty on worse mornings with nothing but a bread roll and a stubborn heart. "I would like to meet Theo," she said. "Good," Rhys said. "He will like you. He likes people who argue with him. He does not meet enough of them." "I imagine people do not argue with the Duke's brother very frequently," she said. "They certainly did not argue with the Duke until recently," he said. She met his eyes. "I find it very easy," she said. "I noticed," he said, "from approximately the first conversation. Oh, I found it remarkable." "You found it inconvenient," she said. "Both," he said, simultaneously. Outside the window, the city moved through its ordinary afternoon, carts and voices, and the particular low hum of a place too large to ever be fully quiet. Inside the library, the fire was going, and the books were organized, and the tea was cooling gently in its cups. She thought about her father, who had believed in honest exchange, who had recorded everything with careful, loving precision, who had died not knowing that his work would outlast him and matter and restore his name and change the shape of more than one life. She thought she would like to tell him. She thought he might have liked this room. He would certainly have reorganized the books differently and argued with her about the system she had chosen, and they would both have enjoyed it. She carried that thought gently. "What are you thinking?" Rhys said. "About my father," she said. "About honest exchange." He looked at her quietly. "He used to say," she continued, "that the only transactions worth making were the ones where both people walked away with something real." She looked at Rhys. "I think I understand what he meant now, better than I did before." Rhys held her gaze for a long moment. The fire crackled, the city hummed outside. "So do I," he said. It was not a declaration. It was not a promise wrapped in grand language. It was simply two people in a warm room, having been honest with each other through difficult things, or sitting with what that honesty had built between them. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was, in fact, everything. And if you have followed Camellia from that cold market morning to this warm, quiet room, if her father's records and Rhys's steady eyes and that stubborn surviving heart have meant something to you, then tell us in the comments, which moment in this story moved you the most? Was it when she grabbed a stranger's arm and begged, not knowing he was a duke? Or was it when she ran through dark streets alone to deliver her father's last gift to the world? Drop your answer below. Hit the like button and tell us where you are watching from. It truly helps more than you know. And if you want to be here for every story we bring, please hit the subscribe button right now. We have so many more stories waiting for you.